Just for a moment, I want you all to recall the person you were when you were 12 years old. What did you like to do? What activities were you involved in? Now imagine if someone asked your 12-year-old self, what kind of car do you want to drive when you grow up? What would you have said? A Corvette? Or maybe a truck because your dad drives a truck? Maybe a pink convertible is more your style. Or maybe you didn't care enough about cars at 12 years old to have any idea. I think it's pretty obvious why we don't often ask 12-year-olds what kind of car they want to drive when they grow up. So much will change by the time they're adults, it's virtually impossible for them to have any realistic idea of the options that they'll have. So why do we ask them what they want to be when they grow up? This question implies that a person has to reach a very specific, yet very ambiguous stage of life called being grown up before they're allowed to be anything. And we've already heard speakers and performers today who may not be considered grown up, but who are already doing amazing things. This question also instills a mindset that you have to pick just one thing to be. But in reality, jobs are just like cars, ever-changing, and so is a person's interests. The World Economic Forum estimates that 65% of elementary school kids today will someday be employed in a career that doesn't even exist yet. And why would you focus on selecting just one thing when the average person changes careers at least 6 times throughout their life? I also think this question may cause kids to go to school with the wrong mindset. If get a good job is what you're always thinking about, school becomes more about grades, GPAs, and resumes, and less about learning. The pressure to make a decision can distract a person from learning the skills that will someday make them a better employee or boss across several career fields. And I think if students were encouraged to learn about anything and everything, regardless of whether that learning resulted in a grade, they would be setting themselves up for a career that they will land, whether or not they ever had an idea or they had one in mind. For the students who know exactly what they want to be, fantastic. That knowledge can enable them to set very specific goals that will allow them to someday realize their dreams. But for the students who are unsure, this question can be unnerving and frustrating. I think most would agree that experiences, learning, and skill development are much more important than knowing what you want to be. However, I think the questions that we're asking students need to reflect those beliefs. So as we go forth, I think we should be more cognizant of the questions we're asking students. What do those questions cause them to think about? And what do those questions cause them to think is important? What would happen if we asked or focused our questions not on what kids are going to do someday, but on what they're doing right now? Questions that focused on encouraging learning and chasing your passions. Because someday, you might end up with your dream car, a super cool looking Jeep, just to realize that the seats are rock hard and it sucks gas like a kid with a milkshake. You might trade your Jeep for a minivan with DVD players for not just one kid, but all the kids, a much better choice. But then when those kids grow up, you might sell your minivan for a Tacoma that you appropriately name Taco. And this vehicle is something you definitely would have dreamed about at 12 years old if you had known it existed. But in the end, it's not important if you knew what you wanted to be at 12 years old. What's important is that you were encouraged and that you took the time to learn how to drive. Thank you.